Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
For federal employees and retirees, inflation is changing the math on everything from retirement income to basic saving strategy. Some of the choices that feel conservative, like leaning on the G Fund or sitting on cash, can actually fall behind over time. Art Stein joins me now to walk through how inflation is affecting federal financial security. Art, thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Terry. Good to see you again.
Certainly one of the financial topics that is a almost daily headline is the inflation numbers. We hear it from the Fed. We hear Congress thinking about affordability. We hear it in terms of the president's approval numbers. But when we talk about inflation from your perspective, what does it actually mean instead of just its shorthand?
Well, inflation, the shorthand definition is it's just the increase in the cost of goods and services in the United States. And that determines our cost of living, which is a slightly separate definition. But when inflation goes up, for most people, their cost of living goes up. If your wages, if your salary is increasing the same amount or even more, then that may not bother you. But if it's not, then you have a problem. And the problem for FERS retirees is that their annuity, their pension, their annuity does not fully compensate for inflation anytime inflation is greater than 2%. And that over, a long retirement could be devastating. And it forces many FERS retirees not only to have to withdraw increasing amounts of money from their investments, primarily their TSP for most retirees, and that may not be sustainable for them.
So let's just put that in practical terms, because I think a lot of times people think about inflation and it's a feeling, it's a vibe. It's things are feeling much more expensive. My money doesn't go as far as it used to. But when you're on an annuity as your primary source of income, and you said FERS is indexed at 2%, inflation's been running considerably above that. How does that play out in people's lives? What sort of choices are they making?
Well, the choices they have to make, and let me just say one thing. The inflation adjustment for FERS is not fixed at 2%. If inflation is more than 3%, the cost of living adjustment is going to be whatever the inflation rate is minus 1%. And if it's between 2 and 3, then it's just fixed at 2, as you said. Problem is we're seeing inflation higher than 3%. This year, inflation rate in April was 3.8%, and it was 3.3% in February. So FERS retirees are getting that minus 1%. So what people end up doing is they have to make choices. One choice is to take more money from their retirement plan, from their investments of all types, including bank accounts. And the other choice is just to consume less, to purchase less, to do fewer things. Buy cheaper food. Hopefully it doesn't get to the point where they have to buy less food, but they might have to buy cheaper food. We've seen a huge increase in the price of beef for various reasons, and so people are eating less beef. We've seen a huge increase in gasoline prices, and presumably, people are driving less, although in the United States, driving is kind of pretty fixed in with people. So some people will drive less, but a lot of people just keep on driving.
So if folks are drawing from that FERS retirement as their principal source of income, what should they be thinking about? Are there different allocation strategies that might mitigate the impacts of inflation on their available balances?
Yeah, so with the TSP, a common mistake that people make is long-term investments, all in the G Fund. Are a majority of the money in the G Fund. And even the L funds make the same mistake. They're very heavily invested in stocks in the beginning, but starting about 10 years before they mature, they become way too invested in bonds, and they end up, the L Income Fund has about 67% of everyone's investments in the G Fund, and another 5 or 6% in the F fund. And the problem with those funds is once you take into account taxes and inflation, they lose purchasing power. So it's very misleading because, if you have money, say, in the G fund, every year you just see that amount increase a little bit, assuming you're not putting money in or taking it out. And you think, great, it's going up in value, but it's not. The purchasing power is going down. The dollar value is going up. And those are two very different things. And so, people have a lot of money in those funds. They're in for a rude shock in 10 or 20 years because all of a sudden they're realizing, oh, hey, I have to take out more and more money from the G and the F fund to maintain my purchasing power.
Art Stein is a certified financial planner with Arthur Stein Financial. Art, what's a smarter way to do it then? Should people broaden the asset classes that they're invested in?
Okay, so let me just also say there are two other mistakes that are very common that people need to watch out for. One is paying off their mortgage early. And the problem with that is that equity in your home and paying off your mortgage early increases the equity you have in your home. The equity in your home has a 0% rate of return. If the price of the home doesn't change, the value of the equity does not change. Now, if the price of the house goes up, equity is going to go up, but that's a rate of return on the house. The equity is not really, generating interest or dividends or capital gains. And it's hard to use the equity in your home. It's locked in various ways. Also, too much money in bank accounts is a mistake because, once again, bank accounts lose money to taxes and inflation. So what people need to do is to realize that historically, only stocks have had a high enough rate of return in a well-managed, well-diversified portfolio. Only stocks have had a high enough rate of return to increase purchasing power after taking into account taxes and inflation. And that means the C and the S and the I fund. And I feel like the TSP recognizes this because the L funds, in the beginning, they're very heavily invested in stocks. I mean, the new ones are about 99% stocks for the first 10 years, and they don't even get down to 60% until about 10 years before they mature. But then they over-invest in bonds when they become the L income fund. So what I would say is, one, make sure you continue to have a solid amount invested in stocks. If you are looking for a long retirement, don't pay off the mortgage early. Invest that money. Everybody can have an outside investment account. Make sure you have a good emergency fund. So maybe use it for that. And don't end up with too much in bank accounts because all of those hurt you when we take into account inflation and taxes.
Art, it almost seems like you're turning conventional investment advice, and I'll use my air quotes here, on its head because people have been told that equities are risky, that you really should pay off your mortgage so that you don't run a risk there. How should people think about this balance between risk and return when they are in their retirement years?
Okay. Terry, the thing is, there are lots of investment risks. One of them is volatility. And bonds are much less volatile than stocks. No question about it. And bank accounts really don't have any volatility. But other investment risks, the major one for long-term investors is losing purchasing power because of taxes and inflation. So people should not say that bonds are safer. They should say that bonds are less volatile. They are safer in that one way, but they are riskier in terms of losing purchasing power to taxes and inflation. Stocks are more volatile, but they have historically had a much higher rate of return for people who are patient and willing to put up with major stock market declines, which, hey, they're going to happen. We haven't had a stock crash in, a while. And there's one in our future. I mean, I know it's going to happen, but we need to just be patient when that happens and hold on. And historically, that has worked out for people. Past performance is no guarantee of future performance. Certainly, there are reasons to think that stock returns in the future will not be as high as in the past. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't disagree with, the fact that there are reasons to think that. But I haven't heard anybody say that stock returns are going to be lower than bond returns over long periods of time.
Art Stein is a certified financial planner with Arthur Stein Financial. Art, thanks as always for keeping our minds open to better financial planning advice.
Thank you very much, Larry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Hear the Federal Drive on demand. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Sean O'Keefe, former Navy Secretary, NASA Administrator, and senior leader across multiple presidential administrations, reflects on the principles that shaped his long federal career. In this episode of Lessons in Leadership, he joined Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA, to discuss motivating teams through uncertainty, leading across agencies, and staying rooted in mission during times of public scrutiny and change.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Sean O'Keefe, former NASA Administrator, former Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget, former Secretary of the Navy, former Comptroller and CFO of the Defense Department, and Professor Emeritus at Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Public Affairs. Welcome, and thank you for joining.
Well, thank you, Shane. Delight to be with you. Appreciate it very much.
What first drew you into public service, and when was it evident to you that leadership was an important part of the roles you played?
Well, I grew up around the public service. My dad was a career naval officer. He was a submariner, and we lived all over the place throughout the country. And as a result, I got an up-close and personal understanding through him, as well as through all the folks he associated with and the environments he was working in, just what the extraordinary value is of public service and what is it that would motivate people to want to be engaged in it and to be really involving themselves in what is something larger than themselves. And the only place that is really formulated properly is within the public sector and the public service. That again is the beneficiary or the beneficiaries are the citizens of the nation, the community, and the region in which you live.
Did you think about leadership early on, saying I need to be a great leader and therefore I'm going to learn how to do it, or did you just naturally evolve into it? Any thoughts on that?
I guess it evolved by the great good fortune of being witness to several really extraordinary leaders, people who really did take the initiative to engage others in the task, to pull together and motivate folks to really contribute their very best to achieve an outcome. And I saw the value of that on multiple occasions and found that was the primary ingredient, the trait, the characteristic that needed to be exhibited is the fundamentals of leadership in moving everyone engaged towards a common objective.
You have served under several presidents. Can you talk a little bit about that? What were there challenges to overcome, or were you away from politics so you didn't get? Talk about that a little bit. How does it differ as you serve through a transition, or does leadership stay the same?
Oh no, it's it's really critically important in transition cases, to be sure. But the two presidents that I served in their administrations were President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush in two different eras, obviously. But as a consequence, that was the closest I came to understanding the nature of the individuals who were in that ultimate leadership capacity, and their capability to motivate. Both of them were just extraordinarily inspiring people who motivated everybody to be part of the solution But most importantly, they also had a capacity of really designating what needed to be done, and you knew that they were perfectly prepared to do it themselves. And that made the task that much more achievable. There were several different circumstances in understanding what the objectives of the senior leadership are all about.
You've worked for different kinds of organizations, political administrations, and then government departments, agencies, and then private sector, and now academia. How does that affect your leadership style? Or do you find that leadership, the core tenets of leadership, are applicable no matter what the organization you find yourself in and having to lead? It doesn't matter where you are, that the core leadership characteristics are the same? Are they different? Are you adapting?
Well, there's a common myth in my judgment, and I'm probably the minority view of this in the academic field of public management. That common myth is that you can't apply the same principles in the public sector that you do in the private sector.
Yeah.
I never found that to be an impediment.
Okay.
It was always a circumstance where, strategy, the focus on the talent, people engaged, the process to going through decision making, the integrity imperative that must be there in order to demonstrate the absolute conviction of what's intended here, as well as the moral standing of what it is you're attempting to achieve. All those factors are very much the same. It's going to have its nuances, and there are very distinctive, differentiators within those organizations and those sectors. But at the same time, those basic principles, those tenets, foundations of what make up organizations and organization theory, in so many ways are fundamentally the same. And how you employ those may be slightly nuanced to match the condition, but they all are imperative in the same direction.
A little bit of a different direction. You were part of the very first cohort of what is now Presidential Management Intern Program, later became the Presidential Management Fellows Program. What did that early experience teach you about leading within government?
The Presidential Management Intern Program, as it started, was designed for just that purpose, a focus on public management, a focus on implementation. And its evolution over time has been extraordinary. It mystifies me why that has been the subject now of an executive order that has dismantled it. And it's absolutely unconscionable, given the nature of the hundreds, thousands of people who moved through that program in the course of the last nearly 50 years that have gone on in some cases to be senior executives within the federal government, and in other cases they've moved on to other kinds of pursuits. But even with that, even for those who have left the service, they walked away with an appreciation of what public service is all about, why it matters, and why this is so critical to get it right. Because by and large, the reason why these functions are delegated to the public sector is because no one else can do it. Usually that's the case. It takes that kind of focus of a public entity in order to achieve an outcome that frankly would not be achieved in other spheres. So as a result of that, it gave me an incredibly in-depth understanding of that process at a very early stage in my career that has lasted the entirety of that professional experience.
A closing question. Who has influenced your leadership style, and what about their example stays with you? And that question can be cast broadly. So, inside government, outside government, perhaps not government at all, somebody that you've met, reported to, been mentored by, a broad net. But when you think about broadly, when you think about who has influenced you, who comes to mind?
I would have to say that the number one, hands down, greatest influence during the course of my life was my dad. He was an engineer, so everything was a calculated risk. I think I was probably 25 before I realized the answer was not to be found for everything in a slide rule, but that was his bent and his mindset. And he taught me how to think critically. And it really was one of the most extraordinary attributes. And he was an inspiring parent and mentor in so many ways. And all the different things I've done throughout the course of his life, I had the opportunity through much of it to be able to consult with him on a variety of things, and always walked away with a more informed perspective. Dad was an extraordinary public servant in his own right.
Well, Sean, thank you very much for sharing your insights and experiences. It has been a pleasure talking.
I'm delighted to be with you, Shane. Thank you so much for doing this.
And this is Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA, reminding you to empower your team and embrace challenges. Until the next time on Lessons in Leadership.
Find the full podcast and future episodes of Lessons in Leadership on the Federal News Network app and anywhere you enjoy your podcasts.